it's a call to the nation, saying that we as a people need to look at what President Trump is doing.
Jeff Mason, you've been covering the White House for a number of
given some impetus, given a voice to some of these folks. Yes, this is anonymous, but this is a voice from a very secure location.
All right. Well, you're doing something very important. You're talking about the R word, the remedy.
The remedy.
And does the Congress look at something like this, or look at the very serious reported problems in the Woodward book and say, these are problems of national security, of military, of the nature of our economy? Do we hold hearings? Do we get people under oath? Do we work on a remedy or not? And that was the actually same word that our colleague Rachel Maddow was bearing down on. I want you to listen to this for your response. Also, again, just really moments ago when she called in.
I think that the curiosity about who this is the rightful province of the White House. I think that what the rest of us should be thinking about is what the constitutional remedy is to the kind of crisis that this anonymous author is alerting us to. I've never seen anything like this. I've never read about anything like this in U.S. history.
And she's absolutely right. So what is the remedy? But here's the politics of this. The remedy is hearings. Now, it's one thing if those hearings in investigation or concerns are elicited and expressed by Republicans. It's something different if Democrats win the House this fall and next year they do it. Because it somehow will be less legitimate if they do it. It somehow will be less authentic if they do it because it's stuck in this quagmire of politics. Republicans, who are the governing majority of this country, if they take the bull by the horn and they lead on this, and they, on the heels of McCain's words from the grave, if you will, on the heels of this op-ed, take to heart the warnings that are being placed out there and begin to inquire publicly about what is really going inside the White House, it will have a profoundly important impact on how we go forward.
The other remedy, which we were discussing at the top of the hour as some of our guests were debating how to do this, and the propriety even of this piece, which is, I admit, and then we've recovered, controversial, is the public resignations. And we haven't seen that in the same way with Trump. Our staff was looking at this with LBJ, for example, who had a very unpopular war. There was a health, education and welfare secretary, John Gardner. He resigned, saying he couldn't support Vietnam. He privately told the president he wouldn't even support him for re-election. That was a person who stood up. The Nixon and Watergate example is often brought up, but that was about criminality. The Vietnam example is important because it relates to people who say even if Donald Trump didn't commit a crime in office, which is under investigation, there are some things so amoral, and this essay calls him amoral, that you stand up and publicly resign. Do you think that should be done more?
No, I think there's a big difference between the LBJ analogy and here. LBJ, that was about a war. It's about a singular decision, a singular act, a singular moment in time. This is about something beyond policy. This is about the way the president is governing, how the president is governing. And so here these folks are in a dilemma, trying to decide, and I've thought about this because it made no sense. The natural inclination is get the hell out of Dodge. This is crazy. I can't do Crazy Town anymore, right?
You have your passport on you, right?
I do. Yeah. Baby, look, I'm ready. I'm there. I'm gone, right?
You know, in the old days of watching, everyone carried around their Constitution.
Right.
Now people just keep the passport.
Let's keep the passport.
Go back.
But
Michael, keep it together. This is a serious broadcast.
No, but here's the rub. That thinking now is shifted to, I got to stay here to hold on to this desk and hold on to these walls to keep this thing together. Because this is about something bigger than a single policy.
So we've talked about the remedy, we've talked about the proper reaction, and we've talked about the person and persons implicated in this piece that are putting up what is this historic alarm bell. The other big question hanging over this is, where does the New York Times, which Donald Trump was just attacking by name, where do they figure into the decision they made? And so it would be interesting to talk to someone from that experience. And guess what? We're going to do that right now. You stay right here with me. This is how you know it's breaking real-time coverage, because Michael Steele's bobbing and weaving. Stay with me. New York Times explained the decision to publish the piece, and I want to read this to you. They said they're taking this rare step to publish the essay by a senior official whose job would literally be jeopardized by its disclosure. And as I mentioned, a former executive editor of that very paper, Howell Raines, joins me now. Howell, thank you for jumping on the phone on Breaking Coverage. Michael Steele's still with me. The question to you, simply off the top, have you ever seen anything like this? Are you confident the New York Times has the real deal and a senior official? And do you agree with the decision?
I've never seen anything like this in the history of the Times. Based on my 25 years inside the institution and my personal knowledge of the men who made this decision, I'm confident the Times has done the right thing. It all hinges on the senior official designation. I don't think James Bennett or his publisher, A.G. Sulzberger, would have gambled on that. And I believe that in their place, I would have made the same decision. And let me elaborate on that a little bit. This is unprecedented on the part of the Times, but we are at a time that calls for leading journalistic institutions to step into the future and figure out new approaches to deal with what is frankly a time of crisis. We have
Let me jump in on that point, Howell, and ask you, when you say new approaches, in your view, given your knowledge of the paper in Washington, do you think it's possible that this highly controversial move could be more effective than the traditional resignation?
Yeah, I think it will have a higher impact. We can't read the mind of the person behind this, but I think another resignation would have just been another serious person leaving an unstable administration. Now, here is why I think this is in keeping with the highest tradition of public service that's always been the Times' guiding light. This op-ed is doing what a supine Congress and a Republican Party leadership is failing to do. This action is necessary at a time when the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader manifestly won't do their jobs. So I'm proud of the Times today, and I have full confidence that James Bennett and the others who were involved in this decision, if any, it's his department. I'm sure he was the key decision maker, along with the publisher A.G. Sulzberger.
And on that point, I'm going to ask you, Howell, and then Michael as well. The Times is very rigorous in every word and sentence that goes in, as you know. So they made the big decision to do this, and then they made the editing decision to run the piece. The piece also carries very provocative language, asserting that there were discussions inside the government about the very unlikely potential of using the 25th Amendment of the Constitution to try to forcibly remove Donald Trump from office. I wonder what you think about how the Times decides to include that. And for context, I want to mention reporting that said that according to two sources with knowledge of a certain conversation, Steve Bannon, who worked for the president at one time, told Trump the risk to his presidency was not impeachment, but the 25th Amendment, and that reportedly when Bannon mentioned that, Trump said, quote, "What's that?" How do you read the resurgence of the 25th Amendment within this provocative piece? First Howell, and then the chairman.
I think it's the appropriate conversation to have, and the piece would have had a gap in it had it not brought that up, because the 25th Amendment is the business that ought to be on the table before the Congress and within the cabinet. And my guess is that someone high up in those circles, not the Congress, but the administration, is the author, and that person's identity will come out, and the nation will be able to judge whether I'm right that the Times has fulfilled its mission for public service at a time of national crisis.
Thank you, Howell. Michael, your thought?
Yeah, I think Howell is right about the Times' approach to this whole thing. The Times knows who this is. So they have the complete picture. It's not going to be a surprise to them when the name comes out, right? So they know. And going forward tells you just how serious they believe this is and how serious they believe this person is to do this. With respect to the 25th Amendment piece, that's been a discussion that's floated back for over a year now. I'm curious as to the timing of when that, if that discussion sort of amped up a bit in recent months. In light of other events that have been going on in the White House, if that's now something that's being revisited among cabinet members, because clearly this person has access to that, may in fact be a cabinet member themselves, we don't know. But I'm curious about the timing of that particular part of that narrative, whether or not this is something that's old and is a reference back to in this op-ed, or if it's something that's more recent that is currently under consideration and discussion by some members.
Right. It's a firecracker, and you think someone risking their job to say one thing was very clear about what he or she chose to include. Michael Steele, as always, I thank you.
Thank you.
Howell Raines, thank you for calling in on this busy breaking story. Up next, the other story that would literally be the top story, if not for everything else going on, Brett Kavanaugh facing fierce questioning from Democrats. I have a special panel when we're back in 30 seconds.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Come on, come on. What's my name? What's my name? What's my name?
Tonight, right now, the Supreme Court fight is in its most pivotal phase. Democrats pressing Trump nominee Brett Kavanaugh in a session that's expected to run well into the night. Now, Democrats have largely shifted from yesterday's demands for documents to regular order today. But many protesters not making that pivot, continuing direct action protests to argue this whole hearing is illegitimate. They point to Republican hypocrisy in blocking Obama's nominee and to the concern that a president under investigation shouldn't get to ram through a judge who could rule on that very case or rule on Trump's reported efforts to end the investigation, which would include the attempted firing of special counsel Bob Mueller, which Democrats pressed today.
And is that special counsel fireable at will or only for cause?
And
in your conception of what's the most appropriate structure?
So that's the hypothetical that you're asking me?
Hypothetical is a word nominees use to duck answers. Kavanaugh also did that on the pretty straightforward question of whether the Constitution allows a president to pardon himself. That's something even Richard Nixon didn't do.
President Trump claims he has an absolute right to pardon himself, does he?
The question of self-pardons is something I have never analyzed. It's a question that I've not written about. It's a question, therefore, that's a hypothetical question.
Does the president have the ability to pardon somebody in exchange for a promise from that person they wouldn't testify against him?
Sarah, I'm not going to answer hypothetical questions of that sort.
You can see there why the hearings are so exciting. Now, Kavanaugh did try to show where he stood on the hypothetical of overturning Roe versus Wade. He said it's not only important, but sort of a super precedent because it's been reaffirmed so much.
What would you say your position today is on a woman's right to choose?
Well, as a judge,
it
is an important precedent of the Supreme Court. By it, I mean Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Been reaffirmed many times. Casey is precedent on precedent.
Precedent on precedent. I am joined by people who know their way around precedents. Sherilyn Ifill is the president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Elise Hogue, president of NARAL Pro-Choice America. And my favorite legal eagle, NPR's Nina Totenberg, who is furiously still covering the hearing there at Ground Zero. My thanks to all of you. This is big. Sherilyn, off the top, did Judge Kavanaugh help or hurt himself today?
So I think he hurt himself today, and I want to disagree with you. This was very exciting.
It was exciting.
It really was.
I didn't realize. Now I know it was. I was there all day today and yesterday.
You missed it. There were very important moments, and we learned a lot about Judge Kavanaugh. And there was a mix of substance and process that was really important. You know the whole issue about the documents we don't have from Kavanaugh's time when he worked for President Bush. That was